This is the Unstarving Musicians podcast. I'm your host, Rabanzo. This podcast features conversations with me and indie music artists. Conversations intended to help other indie musicians be better at marketing, business, the creative process, and all the other things that empower us to do more of what we love. Make music. Well, hello, my most excellent listeners, friends, fans, audience. Love you guys. This is the second installment / re-release of the Unstarving Musician's Guide to Getting Paid Gigs, how to get booked and paid what you're worth over and over again, written by yours truly. This is also episode 106. Woo! That's a lot for me. And this episode is dedicated to chapters 3 and 4 of the Unstarving Musician's Guide. They are among the first few podcast episodes I ever recorded, of anything. Before that, I should tell you that I'm recently back from a European vacation, in case you didn't hear the last episode. My wife and I tootled about Ireland, including Dublin, Clowerhead, and Drogheda. Yes, we did the Guinness tour, and yes, it tastes better in Ireland. We saw some archaeological and historical sites and some friends. It was very cool. Dublin is quite a nice, clean city. So are those other towns I mentioned, Clowerhead and Drogheda. We also spent time in Provence and Avignon. That is the south of France, for those of you who are not in the know of that region. And finally, Italy, where we spent time in Venice, Greve, Florence, and Rome. Lots of amazing food, wine, history, architecture, art, and nice people. Lots of people in some of those places. Not all of them, but some of them, for sure. Before we get into the next two chapters of the Unstarving Musician's Guide, I have an important message for musicians who want a little help moving the proverbial needle. I somewhat recently announced the launch of the Unstarving Musician coaching sessions, and these sessions are a way for you, musician, to get help with your music journey, help in the form of one-on-one sessions with yours truly. As I mentioned, I've been a gigging musician for many years, and the Unstarving Musician project has given me the benefit of expanding my own knowledge base by speaking with and interviewing hundreds of other musicians, some of whom are songwriters, recording engineers, band leaders, and visual artists, among other things. Here's the good part. I'm opening up 3 slots pro bono. That means free. I had intended to do this over a month ago, as this is the second but last time I'll be extending this offer. The small catch is you must apply. To do so, just go to unstarvingmusician.com/coaching. The very first thing you'll see on that page is a place to enter your info to apply. There are only 3 spots available. Applications must be received by June 30th of 2019. That's this month as I'm recording. Again, just go to unstarvingmusician.com/coaching to apply, and I look forward to connecting with you. All right, another 2 chapters of the Unstarving Musician's Guide to Getting Paid Gigs. I'm excited to revive these recordings here on this podcast. Now then, the Unstarving Musician's Guide is based on my personal experience and time I've spent talking to other musicians, and I wrote it to help other musicians do what I did for so many years and still do a bit, and that is get more of the good gigs and get paid doing it. That's important. Having lived and worked as a musician in the DFW and San Francisco Bay areas, I gigged at will, when, where, and with whom I wanted. I've mostly worked with cover bands as a part-time musician, but I've also worked with many original artists. The principles presented in the book are transferable to original artists, songwriters, full-time musicians, actors, visual artists, etc. And the Unstarving Musician's Guide to Getting Paid Gigs, by the way, was available as a standalone podcast. If it's still up, I'm not sure if it is. It will be coming down soon. Now it's going to be available here as a series of in-between interview episodes. These recordings for the book, as I said earlier, were my very first foray into podcasting, and I'm rapidly approaching 150 episodes as a podcast producer and host. I have another podcast called Partner for Leads, which is for small business folks. I hope you'll check that out sometime. I'm revisiting these recordings for the first time in about 3 years. Is that right? Let's see. Now 2 years, I think it is. Yep. Well, actually, rolling up on 3 years pretty soon. Please check out my dramatic tone in these recordings. It's kind of funny. All right, the primary themes of these 2 chapters are working in multiple bands and relationships. Working in multiple bands got my name spread around like dirty laundry. I'm not even sure if that's a thing, but a guy I met once was very enthusiastic about my playing and said he was going to spread my name around like dirty laundry. I think he meant a good thing. I'm pretty sure he did. It gave me more exposure to more musicians, more followers, and more opportunity as a gigging musician of kind of the freelance variety. Kinda. There was an incestuous element about this all, however, but it worked in my favor in the form of like splinter bands and projects, which these chapters talk about. Then there were the referrals. Those were huge. Working in multiple bands can be tricky, and it requires balancing and maintaining of good relationships, but I am a big fan of doing it. Big fan of working in multiple bands. You should try it out if you aren't doing it. Relationships are so important as a musician, a songwriter, a visual artist, whatever, as a human being. This book is mostly about relationships, but specifically relationships with bandmates, but also with your fans, your supporters, and venues, the venues that you perform at. Bandmates will do almost anything for you if you just ask for their help. Imagine how that gets magnified when you do stuff for them. Little stuff, too. Which, I was going to say, which leads me to venues. That's not a good segue. But venues, I do want to talk about that. This is important stuff. I know a guy here in Panama who is a master at this, and I actually play with him. It takes a little extra work, but it's totally worth it. And I'm going to talk about this in the readings you're about to hear. Okay, I hope you enjoy these readings of chapters 3 and 4 of the Unstarving Musician's Guide. Most importantly, I hope it somehow helps you personally, or perhaps helps you help a friend. Here we go. I mentioned as much in the opening pages, but in December of 2013, I realized that I had booked a gig in every month of 2014. Whoa. That was my reaction, because it was a first for me. I reflected for a moment to recall how it happened. What I realized is that there were 3 primary reasons for this. 1, I made myself available. 2, I built relationships. 3, I did my best to contribute and impress. There was some stuff in between, but these 3 things are the core elements that made it all happen. Let's talk about how I made myself available and what it meant for my 2014 gig calendar. Sometime in 2011, I was growing a bit discontented with one of the 2 bands I worked with at the time. Typical band drama and personal baggage at work, but my discontent prompted me to seek out other projects. I'd been through this exact type of discontent more than once before. Typical drama queen on drums, right? With all of my predominantly self-inflicted discontent, I set out to find work with other bands. It wasn't too difficult for me, as I'd already had a friend asking me to work with him. It turned out he had a fun project and needed a drummer in the near future. Boom, I got the gig. The band I joined had a number of regular bookings. Many of those bookings were quite decent in terms of pay and quality. Then, some weeks later, another request came from within this same band. One of the band's guitarists asked me to sub for an upcoming gig with his side project. I thought that this was a one-off gig, but as it turned out, I was unknowingly signed up as the band's new drummer. At this point, I was admittedly starting to feel overextended, so I committed to a limited number of gigs with this side project band. Nice problem, right? Multiple bands and relationships. Once I made myself available, something else came into play. Relationships. I had venue relationships, as did these 2 bands that I joined. The other 2 bands that I was already working with also had venue relationships, so I found myself working with bands where several members were hustling for gigs. Each of us had cultivated relationships with different venues. It was probably only a moderate hustling on everyone's part, but when 6 to 8 people in 4 different bands are working venues for gig opportunities, good things tend to happen. Several venues started booking these bands before the end of 2013. At this point, it may sound like the secret is joining 3 or 4 bands that are well connected, but the story actually gets more involved. The mechanics of sustaining a busy gig schedule, I learned, has other moving parts. Pro tip: performing live offers a different kind of benefit from personal practice time and band practice. I've always contended that songs start sounding best when they've been played live 20 to 30 times. My personal relationships with venues brought my new bands into venues they'd never played before, and these new bands introduced me to new venues that I'd never played. These new band relationships contributed in yet another way. I was referred by my new band pals to even more bands, which led to a number of opportunities to sub for other drummers. This turned out to be a period of time where I was definitely overextending myself, but only in the beginning. More on that later. Let's go back to December of 2013 for a moment. My calendar was filled with gigs covering January through December of 2014. There was an interesting and key relationship that accounted for the 12 months worth of advanced bookings. One of my bandmates, who played in 2 of the bands I'd recently joined, had booked both bands at the same venue. These particular bookings scheduled the aforementioned 2 bands in alternating months. To recap that for you, this one bandmate booked 1 gig in each month of 2014 in advance. I'll admit that this is a somewhat unusual set of circumstances, but this is part of how it happened. An important side note is that the venue was happy to book 12 dates with 2 different bands through one person. Little wins like that matter a lot in the relationship building process. You may be thinking, wait a minute, you got 12 gigs because of one guy who played in 2 of your bands and all with a single venue? In reality, I'd already done something similar with venues that I knew personally. By mid-January, I had well over 12 gigs booked in 2014. If that still sounds a little complicated or fortuitous or whatever, I'm trying to emphasize the power of the relationships at work here. It's somewhat remarkable if you think about it. At any rate, I can't say enough about relationships. In fact, I'll say more about them in the pages that follow. By this point in time, I was making a very conscious effort to impress both my bandmates and our audiences. That's not to say that I wasn't paying attention to the music around me, to what my bandmates were playing. Man, did that pay dividends. New offers came in throughout 2013 into 2014. So what did my conscious effort to do my best at every gig mean for me? It meant not drinking before gigs and drinking only moderately at gigs. If you don't enjoy drinking or just have a strict policy of not drinking when you perform, you're ahead of the game and a better musician for it. Doing my best also meant learning my parts well. Very importantly, it also meant listening to my bandmates. Listening to what others were playing and consciously not overplaying is part of my normal approach to working with other musicians. I truly believe that this is a big part of why I've had the good fortune of being a sought-after drummer in my local market. Not everyone does this, so it's an easy way to set yourself apart from other players. There were lots of other little things too, like making an effort to be genuinely friendly and nice to everyone at the shows, being flexible with bands and venues, dressing the part, showing up on time, conducting myself in a professional manner, and possibly other behaviors I'm not even aware of. I realize that all of this may sound like good common sense, but as hard as I try to be all of these things, I'm always learning how someone else does it even better. There's always someone from whom you can learn something. Always. Pro tip: make your bandmates look good, and you'll always get the call for gigs. The same goes with making your venues or booking contact look good. Did you catch the multi-band effect in this chapter? It strengthened my network of musicians, bands, venues, and fans. Working with literally 15 different musicians was like hiring a sales team. We were selling each other in 2013 and 2014, but from my personal vantage point, it felt like everyone was selling me. That probably sounds a little egocentric, but it really did feel that way. In the business world, this is sometimes referred to as the power of partnerships or the power of networking. This is the advantage of working with multiple bands. It's an advantage that I'm still leveraging today. Whether yours is a band of brothers or a band of brothers and sisters, it should be your extended family, a band of homies. Play with people you respect and actually enjoy hanging out with, and you'll work well together. If nothing else, be a pal to as many bandmates as possible. Better yet, do your best to be a compassionate friend to everyone in your bands. Do this like you really mean it, and then really mean it. You'll find that your bandmates will do just about anything for you. When it comes to getting gigs, getting referred for gigs, and getting invited into side projects, being a good person and fellow musician to your bandmates will really work in your favor. It has for me. If you're thinking that perhaps it's just my personality, you're partly right, but I'm also human. I can be an ass. I can also be quite a smart ass. I can be inconsiderate, inappropriate, and sometimes clueless. But you know what? I'm always working on it. All of it. Saying I'm sorry or doing small things to make up for being an ass can be hard, but it sure is worth it. I'm a people person, no doubt. I'm also a people pleaser by nature. You certainly don't have to be like me to be a likable person. Be yourself, be creative, but be mindful and considerate. If any of this is making you cringe, talk to someone, pick up a self-help book, or find a podcast on building relationships that matter. Don't just listen to the music around you. Listen to the voices and people around you. Learn to listen or start by pretending to listen, and then learn to do it right, i.e., really listen. That's all you have to do to be a friend to your bandmates. Well, almost. But listening to bandmates, booking owners, and venue contacts will make new friends for you faster than you can blink an eye. By the way, I'm the king of interrupting people mid-sentence. My mind is always thinking of something profound or otherwise clever to say. I'm making fun of myself here because I want to reiterate that I'm riddled with personality flaws. If I can be a good listener, so can you. This is all to say that building relationships will get you gigs. It can help you get as many gigs as you could possibly want. Let me share a few simple suggestions that don't require any thinking. Help a bandmate carry their gear. If you're a drummer or the guy or gal that hauls a PA system, how awesome is it for one of your band members to help you out, even if it's only occasionally? Try hanging out with your bandmates after the gig, especially the one who's the last to finish loading out, usually me. Ask your bandmates if they want to have a beer or grab a bite after a gig. Schmooze at the venue after the gig if time permits. This is what's known as quality time. This quality time will help you get to know fans, booking contacts, and venue staff a little better, and is something that I highly recommend. Am I stating the obvious? Do you ever do any of these things? Have you done anything like this lately? Schmoozing. I met a Russian guy about 6 months ago before I started writing this book, and he had a phrase for relationship building. Schmoozing and boozing. It's tongue-in-cheek, of course, but this phrase resonated with me. I enjoy wine tasting and microbrews, so it wasn't completely tongue-in-cheek for me. Many venues serve beer, wine, and or spirits. If you're not a drinker, I get it and respect you for it. Order a soft drink. There are some more creative ways to do networking, as I'm about to describe. Got a wife, girlfriend, or buddy who drinks? I'm giving you an excuse to get together for a good time and a perfect opportunity to schmooze at a venue. Allow me to share my personal experience with wineries in particular. I play gigs at several wineries on a regular and recurring basis. My aforementioned love of wine has driven my wife and me to join wine clubs at a couple of local area wineries. If wine and wineries are not your thing, microbreweries and establishments that specialize in microbrewed beers often have membership clubs also. These membership clubs are a fantastic way to meet venue owners and booking contacts. In fact, I can credit my beginnings in the Northern California winery scene to a couple of winery memberships. It didn't hurt that my wife also poured in the tasting rooms of a couple of local wineries. My wife's fun job of working tasting rooms not only got us nice discounts on wine, but connected us with many other area wineries. She was in an exclusive circle that is the wine industry. This was my foot in the door. After the first winery gig, word got around. Plus, I was able to add this to my musical resume and the resume of the first band that I booked at a winery venue. After my band gigged at one winery, I set my sights on another one. When I contacted them by email, I mentioned our recent performances at a neighboring winery. By the time I had a second venue on the past gigs resume, I pursued a third one, and so on and so on. Today, it's easy to show the venues you've played on your band's website and or Facebook page, and a great way to show prospective venues that you've performed venues similar to theirs. It's also a great idea to ask for references ahead of time. If you're confident that a venue was happy with your past performances, ask if they can give you a reference. Even better, ask for a testimonial that you can post on your band's website or Facebook page. Pro tip: when listing past venues, be sure to link to their website or Facebook page. This is helpful proof that you played the venue, especially if your band is listed on the venue's site or Facebook page. Schmoozing isn't something just for gig prospects. It's also a good thing to do with the venues you currently play. If you haven't yet noticed, the landscape of live music is always changing. As an example, a venue could close its doors, but your key contact could still be helpful in getting you gigs in the future, like at a new venue. In another scenario, a venue contact could leave your best venue for another opportunity, but if you have a good relationship in place, you're much more likely to continue playing at that venue with the help of an introduction to the new booking contact. All of this has happened to me. Every relationship matters, and relationships are built on schmoozing and actual friendships. Are you engaging venues in person? How about spending some occasional quality time with fellow band members and or those who may want to hire you? Here are some more ideas. Organize a happy hour, lunch, or dinner with friends at one of your target venues. Try to do it at a time when your booking contact and influencers are working there. Spending a little money at the venue is like showing a little love. Ask for a meeting with your venue contacts, or just ask them if you can pop by to show them your latest promotional stuff or press kit. Organize a happy hour, lunch, or dinner with bandmates. You'll know what to do when you get there. Go see other bands with your bandmates. Host a barbecue or some other type of casual get-together for your bandmates. The idea is to get some face time and to nurture relationships, all with sincere intention, of course. People these days tend to have a keen BS meter, so be genuine and forthcoming about your motives. With venues, just tell them that you're interested in working together or express appreciation for your existing working relationship, whichever the case may be. With fellow band members, you shouldn't have to explain. You just want to reinforce the friendship and foster the creative spirit that you share. That is a wrap. Chapters 3 and 4 of the Unstarving Musician's Guide to Getting Paid Gigs. I hope you enjoyed it. Most of all, I hope there was a little something in there you can use. You can learn more about the book at unstarvingmusician.com/book. Hey, if you're a if you're a regular listener or a registered listener of the podcast, you know I'm a fan of Bandzoogle. Let me tell you why. Bandzoogle powers websites for thousands of musicians around the world, from garage bands to Grammy winners. They have an easy-to-use system to help you get your site up fast. Lots of mobile-friendly templates to help you customize and design your site for yourself or your band or both. And it's built for musicians by musicians. How cool is that? Here are some of the features they have. A merch and download store to sell music and merch commission-free right on your website. A tour calendar to promote your shows and sell tickets commission-free. Mailing list tools to grow your fan list and send professional-looking emails and newsletters. Integrations to pull in content from all of your socials. And live support from a musician-friendly team 7 days a week. Plans start at just $8.29 a month, but you can go to bandzoogle.com to start a 30-day free trial. And you can use the promo code ROBONZO, ROBONZO, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. That's bandzoogle.com, promo code ROBONZO, to build your artist website today. Look for links to just about everything talked about in this episode in the show notes at unstarvingmusician.com/podcast. Thanks again for listening. I really appreciate you. I love you, man. I love you too, girls. With much gratitude, peace, love, and more cowbell.